Good afternoon, and welcome once again to Sunday Afternoons with our historian. It's a beautiful late spring Sunday afternoon here, and I'm glad to see you. Well, I can't see anybody, but I'm glad to have you all here, whether now or later on our YouTube channel. This will be the last weekly. Starting 2 weeks from now, we'll go to a every other week schedule, given that the weather's getting nicer, things are starting to open up again. But let's get right on to the topic. This is a continuation of last week's lecture, discussion about the art of Manville, Wakefield. And you might notice, once again, I'm all by myself here. Well, hopefully not all by myself. It's one person watching. Thank you. Good to see you. So today I'm going to talk about more of the art of Manville, Wakefield. Manville Wakefield was the Sullivan County historian, an art teacher at Sullivan County Community College, and wrote two well-respected books. This one, Coal Boats to Tidewater, about the D&H Canal, and another book that was about the New York O&W Railroad, which actually from Ellenville north was run right along the D&H Canal bed after 1902. But today, instead of all those wonderful pictures that you got to see, in fact, this scratchboard art right here is from his book. This is a later edition. This wasn't the cover for the first edition. But one of the nice things about his seminal 1965 book was his maps. Now, those of you who might follow my Where is Our Historian and this series have probably heard me talk about the Canadian maps. The D&H Canal Company in 1990, in a bankruptcy proceeding, everything that belonged to the D&H Canal, which at that point wasn't the Canal Company anymore, in 1898 they took Canal out of their name and became the D&H Railroad, which was itself a freight line until probably midway through the 20th century, when coal finally gets supplanted by heating oil, which we're now, of course, supplanting with electricity and other modes these days, and it's a good thing, too. But in 1990, the D&H Canal completely liquidated, and Canadian Pacific bought out everything, and all of their archives and stuff got moved up to Canada. And then that went through a couple different companies, because the DHTHC, the Delaware and Hudson Transportation Heritage Council, of which I am now president, proud to say, a group of any of us that are concerned with the story of the D&H Canal and all of the museums along the line, we are aware of these wonderful maps, and if you caught me 2 weeks ago, you saw we have in our collection here some of the reservoir maps. These maps were roughly 2 foot by 3 foot and very, very detailed. And Manville Wakefield had access to these. We believe that what he had is that Ellenville Library has on microfilm black and white copies of these maps. And this is the Delaware and Lackawaxen aqueducts. And here it is, and I'm going to go, because I can, watch out here, getting a little unsteady here. Ooh. You see that one right there. What I've got for you over here is a copy of one of those Canadian maps. I tried to get the lighting as best I could. And if you want to, if you can see here, you can really see. He was very fortunate. Now, these were microfilm in black and white, not the 300 DPI at-size scans that I get to work with. But here's a printing, and I want to thank Expo Rail and the Canadian Archives, Expo Rail Archives, for permission to use these. They've been a big help for me. And as I started thinking about what to do today, it occurred to me that there's some real parallels. So what Manville Wakefield did was he had these maps, and they're all about that size. They only have maybe two I want to start at one end here. Let me see where I'll start. They only had 2 and 3 miles worth of the canal on them. But what he did, I want to find the beginning here, Hawley to Lackawaxen section. Wait, you'd think I would set these up, right? And I thought I did. So no, actually, here we are right here. So he started right here with Honesdale. So it's a total of 10 maps that were before each section, so this was the Lackawaxen section, so we're starting in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, named for Phillips Hone, the first president. And these maps were very detailed. Manville only gives you some of the details here. But what it struck me was, as I've been working on my Where is Our Historian series, I started taking these same maps. Now, I had the fortunate case that I have them digitally, so I can blow them up and I can move them around. But when I started going out into the field, I was sitting with my device, having to like shuffle from map to map to map, and I never knew where I was. So what I did is what I think that Manville had to do, which is that I have in the last 2 months taking some 80 maps and turned them into 31 maps, so that logical sections of each. So I believe what he's got on here, I probably have on 2 maps on my computer but you can see here, he's got an awful lot of the detail. And as part of our virtual museum effort, and this actually started with the DHTHC as well, we had always wanted to have some sort of a map that showed you all of the publicly accessible parts of the D&H Canal, of which there are many. Sullivan and Orange County own all of it. And Sullivan County, I always like to give them a shout out. They do a wonderful job of opening it up for people to see. But here he had to do what I found myself doing was putting every section of the canal in order, because we wanted to have this map. Originally, it was going to be a PDF document, but about 2 years ago, a board member, Matt Berlin, was inspired by Bob Endenberg of Open Space Institute to start a Google map of the canal route. And I've been working busily taking these maps, the ones that I've put in a row, and putting them up on the internet. We haven't went live with it, but I will post at the end of today, I'll post a link to it. It will be live off of our webpage sometime this month. We've got a whole new webpage that the excellent Kayla Altland down in Atlanta, Georgia, my coworker. But look at the level of detail here we've got. And if you're out in the field, it's really wonderful. These have nowhere near as much information as the maps that I've been working with. So this Google map will be showing you all the different museums, all the spots along this route where you can publicly accessible. So you're not going to, I also like to point out where it's on private property. Please don't go looking at D&H Canal remains without talking to the property owner when it's on private property. And hopefully I'll delineate most of that. This will be a work in progress. This will keep going. For instance, as we release the Where is Our Historian video, I've probably got 20 or 30 of them. Those are best shot before the trees leaf out. I won't be shooting much of that now until the fall. But my editor, Courtney McNamara, has got, we've put up at least, I'm going to say 6 so far. As they come up, I'm linking them onto this Google map. And this Google map also, I'll be adding pictures of the site when I know exactly where it is. But look at the level of detail. Imagine the amount of work. And these are not scratchboard. These are, I've just pen and ink, I'm going to say. You can see these missing things, these little white things, there were stuff that have already fallen off because these are ephemeral. These weren't meant to last. And the glues that they used, these were things that he glued on afterwards, and they're in the boxes. And at some point when we have the time, we'll figure out the right way to put them back. We don't really need them back because, of course, we have the books. But imagine the level of detail that he got. If you see here, we've got the names of the lock tenders. This is probably in most instances the name of the lock tender in the latter period. So here we are finally, we're in Orange County at Port Jervis. Now this really doesn't give you, when you get into towns on these other maps, and we'll look at those a little later, you really get to see a lot more detail than this. But it's really been helpful for me, and Where is Our Historian, when I get to a site, I consult these maps and I then know what was alongside it. So it's interesting, you'll see a sawmill. Wherever there's a dry dock, there's usually a sawmill, and there was a boat builder there. They had the sawmill right there. They had the dry dock where they build and launch the boat. I'm also was amazed at how many of the locks had groceries next to them. Now, Manville didn't get that level of detail. These actually, if you have the books or have looked at them, are like 2-pagers, and it just would have put, it would have been overwhelming. But they're a wonderful source, and you'll get to see and learn what they have. I can't actually give you the maps. We've got a very restrictive license for the Canadian Expo Rail folk. Here we are at the summit level. It was called the summit level because it was the highest point on the canal. It was 17 miles. They say 17 miles with no locks. So when you started at Honesdale, you worked your way down to the Delaware River. Then you were working your way up to the summit level. At the tail end of the summit level, Lock 50, at the Bova Road site in Sullivan County, it starts dropping. It's just got a mind of its own here. Someday I'm going to figure out how to do this in landscape instead of portrait. I know I've seen it done, but I haven't figured it out yet. Oh, I am proud though. Last week was the first week I didn't have a technical glitch on a Sunday afternoon with our historian. Finally, right? Lock 25. That's a great lock. I visited that. That's publicly accessible, but that has a dry dock next to it. There's a feeder, and there's no sign of it left anymore. Without these maps, I wouldn't even know. But there was also a sawmill that today the only thing that's left is you can sort of see the mill race. And there was a grocery. It's funny, all these locks right in here, most of them had groceries next to the locks. I was astounded. But you know, these canalers had to eat. There was up to 1,000 boats in a season at the top of it. You see all these Middleport. The town of Kerhonkson was called Middleport back in the day. Hornbeck's Basin, that's our latest Where is Our Historian that was just released this week. And I just put that up on the map. As I say, when I get off with you folks today, I'll actually put a link to the Google map so you can all get a look at it. It's not finished, but I've got all the locks in the right spot, more or less. I'm sure people will be giving me corrections. I'm fine with that. Nobody's perfect. I always like to say 2 error is human, and I'm oh so human. And here we are. I used to take these maps with me when I went. I'm trying to get to the final section. Well, you know what? Let me get you over here and sit down, and we can talk a little bit more about what we see. Come on now. There we go. So I wanted to open with that one because I happen to have that wonderful print. But here we've got the town of Rondout. You know, if you go there today, you can actually see Island Dock, but now it's just an overgrown. So I always like to talk about this, but now it's great to have the map. This was the Rondout Creek went this way. In 1844, the Canal Company hired James McEntee. James McEntee is an interesting character. He grew up in Western New York, got a job as a young man on the Erie Canal working under Benjamin Wright, Judge Wright, and became a civil engineer. And Judge Wright brought both he and his friend John Jervis here to work on the D&H Canal. John Jervis worked for, 4 or 5 years and then went on to other things. James McEntee was all over the map. He ran boats down to New York City with D&H Coal. He owned the Mansion House, later owned by George Von Beck, another fascinating character I'll talk about someday to you good folk. But in 1844, the D&H Canal Company hired him to build Island Dock. Well, you know, how do you build an island, right? Well, today we actually do it with landfill. And when we talked 2 weeks ago, one of the maps that I showed you had the landfill that exists today of the Ulster and Delaware Railroad. It'd be over this way on this map. But what they did is the creek went that way. They dug this even channel, and you can see it to this day. There's boats that more up to it now. And now it's closed off right here, which means you can walk. You shouldn't do it, though. It's private property. It's awful overgrown. I don't see signs of the loading keys, but we have wonderful pictures. I believe that Island Dock will be the next Where is Our Historian in 2 weeks' time. So you'll get a look, and we'll be incorporating some of our great historic pictures at that point as well. Slatesburg, you know, at low tide at Slatesburg, you can see the outline of a D&H Canal boat, and that's because, you'll see right over here, the Canal Company left all their boats here. They got permission to park them between the lighthouse and Slatesburg. They're all gone now. I'm told that there were D&H Canal boats in the round out until the mid 20th century. Well, the canal operated until at least 1916, 1917. But then I'm told the Army Corps of Engineers burned them all because they were a hazard to navigation. People always ask us, do you have a canal boat? I would love to have one, but those final boats were 91 foot long, 14 and a half foot wide, carried 130 tons of coal. Where would you put it? What would you do with it? People talk about making replicas of it. I mean, we've certainly got great models in the museum, and I'll be showing those in our virtual museum, the third leg of our video series, all of which is up on our YouTube channel. At this point, I always like to ask you, please subscribe. The more we get, eventually, when we get up to 100 people, we're getting there, we're closing in. We will then have our own URL. It'll make us easier to find and our content easier to find. And we'll be adding to this beyond COVID, I tell you. That's right. Since we're right there, why not just keep going the other direction here? Since I've been full-time here at the museum, I'm very fortunate, starting March 1st, through a NISCA, New York State Council of the Arts grant. This made my position full-time here at the Canal Society for at least the next 2 years, possibly 3. I've got to figure out how that works, huh? But here we go. Now, this is Eddyville, named for George Eddy, who had a mill here. There's a dam here that really, if you look at it, there's a naturally occurring dam, but then they added to it. The canal company had to, when they enlarged in 1850, they probably made that dam a little taller so as to ensure that they would have 6 foot of water and the slack water navigation. You know, I was just on an all-day Zoom with our design team for our wonderful new museum at the Depew Tavern here in High Falls, slated open in less than 2 years now. And the phrase slack water had come up. So I looked it up, and slack water technically is that point at ebb tide when the water is not going in either direction. But I have to think that when they refer to slack water navigation here, they're just talking about water that they could use that wasn't so fast that they couldn't operate in 2 directions. So they had slack water on the Lackawaxen just outside of Honesdale, and they had slack water from the creek locks, lock number 2, up all the way to here where there was a guard lock. The Canal Society owns that property. In fact, the very first Where is Our Historian is the Eddyville guard lock, and I show you what little there is today and the garbage that less than considerate people have dumped there. When I was going through our archives, now that I'm working full. So here we are. As I was saying, here we've got this map of Eddyville. Now I don't remember what story I was in the middle of. Oh, I know. I've been working in our archives, going over, finding some great pictures, doing scans of them, and I found one black and white picture in the Manville Wakefield drawer. I should have brought it out if I'd known I was going to talk about it. I did not recognize it, but it's actually in. You know, during the COVID coronavirus, we're all so on the internet that I keep wondering when the internets will break down. This is the 3rd time now. Hopefully, the 3rd time's the charm. I'm sitting here talking to you, good folks, talking to myself. That's what they pay me to do. Isn't that amazing? And then all of a sudden, it just goes white, and I'm gone. So here we are in the 3rd try, talking about Eddyville. Wonderful picture, and I'll have to put it up on our site, on our Facebook page in the next week or 2. All right, I'm going to try again. But you might notice I'm no longer on my phone. I'm now on my laptop. I think I am live. Yes. This isn't quite as good because last time I tried this, a lot of the pictures just didn't. Yeah, see, it compresses them. But just to try and go through here. So here we've got the manga. Imagine the amount of work. These are just wonderfully detailed maps. I put out a challenge. I asked people if they wanted to see their towns, but nobody took me up on it, did they? So there's his artwork, and you can see, you can sort of learn if you're interested in such things about how these things were, how book production in the pre-digital age. There's notes about the size, 5 inches. This is bigger than 5 inches, so that's a note to whoever burned the plate that this wants to be 5 inches wide, and this gives you the page number and the position that it wound up in the final book. Here we've got Bolton Basin. You know, I've been trying to find Bolton Basin. I know where it is when I drive past it, but but I just can't. I don't think there's anything left of it. You know, there's a basin near my house here in Accord, and I would always see the wastewater from the street. It's on private property. And I finally realized that from these wonderful maps that it was actually the street was in the where the basin was, and so in the making of the street, anything of the canal just got obliterated. But we're fortunate that there is so much of the canal you can see, which is why we're very excited about this new Google map that we're going to be putting live that you'll be able to see later today. Um, because it will help you if you're as sort of fanatical about it as I am to uh, to see what's in the ground today. There's an awful lot. You can learn a bit about how they did things by what's in the ground today. So here we've got Berryville. I happen to have a part interest in a house just up the river from Berryville. So I spent some time. This is another town where when you go there, it's very hard. There's very little what you see on this left. There was an aqueduct there. You might be able to make out some of the stonework. The basin is largely gone, if memory serves. Some of you who are more cognizant of that area may weigh in and tell me when I'm wrong. What? Me wrong? Um, it's really nice. We had one Sunday without technical problems, but you know, here we are. Port Bend, named for Benjamin Depew. So the canal company, you'll see all these Port Orange, which was named for Orange County because Port Orange was right at the northern end of Orange County. Port Jervis, named for John Jervis, the second chief engineer of the D&H Canal. Um, let's see, Port Bend, Benjamin Depew. Middleport, I guess because it was kind of in the middle. And Port Jackson, which my best Jackson, the first populist president here. Creek locks. You can see those creek locks right from the road. People don't like you to look at them. Everybody worries about liability. I'm sorry about this. I had it set up on an easel so that you could see it better, but my phone kept dropping out of Facebook. Whether that's a Facebook problem or my phone problem, we've been using my phone regularly. Sunday afternoon, maybe more. I haven't counted. I'm losing count, people. Summitville, named because it was at the summit of the D&H Canal, kind of at the highest point. Part of the 17-mile summit level. Part of what I'm trying to figure out with these maps is that in the testimony in the court case, they refer regularly to the 12-mile level and the 3-mile level. And so the 3-mile level had to be a section that was 3 miles without a lock. Likewise, the 12-mile. I'm going to start trying to figure out where those were. It'll help pull together the stories and help your understanding. I was helping Ron Knapp, who right now is talking about covered bridges in the Time in the Valleys Museum. I'd love to be watching him, but everybody picked my 2 o'clock time. I don't know. I missed John Conway a couple weeks ago. Same museum, too. Hey, we got to get it together and pick different times for our Facebook Live thing, folks. I can't change mine too much. After all, it's called Sunday Afternoon with the Historian. So I can have it between 12 and 6, I guess. We'll have to talk. But I was looking for some D&H covered bridges in Sullivan County and was able to locate Quigleys Lock. So Wakefield refers to Quigleys Lock, and nobody else does. That's because it's known as Tom Taylor's Lock, Lock 32. Because I have these wonderful maps, I found that Lock 32 was on Quigley's land, and so at some point in the period, it was referred to as Quigley's Lock before Tom Taylor was the lock tender. The funny thing about that too is we have a picture of Ben Hendricks at Tom Taylor's Lock, so go figure. But it's interesting. I think most of the names that Manville Wakefield gave for the locks were the people in the latter period. He probably got them from Du Bois Weber, and they were probably in the 1890s and the 1900s. As I said, Port Jackson, also known as Accord. Don't say Accord, everybody. It's Accord. Um, always when I lived in New York City too. Houston Street. It's a way to just, it's not Houston, it's Houston. Accord. Um, Obviously, probably named for Andrew Jackson. A lot of parallels between the presidency of Andrew Jackson and some of our current political situation. They didn't always name the towns ports. Here's just Wurtsboro. Who do you think that's named for, huh? One problem with doing it this way, I can't see questions so much. You're back. Dave can take me out. Thank you, Dave. I've been to Bolton Basin. I just get there and don't know what I'm looking at, Mariana. Um, Here we got Burrow. I hope this are these compressed, folks, or are they? The last time I used my laptop like that, it seemed to compress the horizontal axis, which, as I like to say, made me look skinnier, and that was nice. But on the other hand, we got Ellenville. There's so many. I've just I took the stack out of the room where it was set up. Ellenville, the story goes, was named. They were trying to rename it. I don't know what it was called prior to Ellenville. And there was a young lady there, and I think she said, "Oh, why'd you name it for me?" And they did. They named it for Ellen. My Ellenville folks. Now that's the story the 19th century history books tell. I always wonder about those stories. I think we do know her full name. I have not committed that to memory. Ellenville, pretty busy place. A lot of so very often in like Port Jervis and in Ellenville, these towns, there's even less of the canal remaining. Whereas some of the stretches that I get when I'm out doing Where is Our Historian, um, um, uh, I'm trying to do too many things at once. Robert Powell wanted a very important point. Yes, I totally agree. Oh, great, Manville, Wakefield's hometown of Ramsville. Um, it's pixelated, my wife, but is it compressed or are we actually broad? Wow, it is what it is, people. This uh, uh, it's flying without a net, folks. Here we go. And I think I've only got one more here to show you. Well, no, I got two more. All right, good. I got two more that I brought in with me, but wind up this rather bizarre and wacky. Courtney's going to have a lot of fun. She'll have to pull this all together before we put it up on. It's at least four pieces, Courtney. I don't need any continuity at all. We'll see, right? It doesn't always have to be perfect. Well, Lord knows I'm not. Here we've got, now see, I forget what I'm talking about. Middleport, now Kerhonkson. I've been down that way. Wonderful stretch. You can walk, if you go where the fire department is in Kerhonkson, the town of Accord Rail Trail is a beautiful, I'm going to say 4 mile stretch from there all the way up to Port Jackson, also known as Accord, with many, many remains of the D&H Canal. And some of my earliest Where's Our Historian was shot there because that's my closest sort of home field, besides, of course, the National Historic Landmark 5 Locks Walk. And it may be that I'll do Facebook Live from there this June for the Path Through History Week. Maybe I'll give you a tour of the 5 Locks Walk. Here's Beaver Falls, the Rock Locks. This is right over in Ellenville, New York. But yes, it's important to write down as we figure these things out. As I say, Quigleys Lock, for instance, I looked in all the books. I'm like, where's Quigleys Lock? And I did finally work it out, I'm proud to say. And that enabled me to actually say what the name of the bridge I was looking at was, Mr. Goodsir's Bridge. These maps that you can get to appreciate these Canadian maps. These were maps that were drawn in 1854 and updated in 1860 something by Russell Farnham Lord Jr. that wound up in the archives of the Canadian Railroad, but that we scholars now have copies of them, and they're a really important source of primary source information. I will be studying these the rest of my life, but you can get the benefit both in Mr. Wakefield's excellent books. You know, a Manville Wakefield book somewhere, right? So here we go. There we saw Port Benjamin, and here it is as it was reproduced in the book. The amount of work. I've got to ask how long it took him to do all this. This is one I didn't show you the original of it. The room there, but another map. But so you can see a lot of these were all pasted on things, and the glue of the time ephemeral doesn't is not meant to last, and they've all fallen out, and they're in the boxes. We have them, and I suppose maybe one day we'll restore them. As I say, it's not since we have this, we don't necessarily need that. Sunday afternoon with a historian, I'm going to say goodbye for now and tell you that I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. And I think I'll probably, weather permitting, be out on the National Historic Landmark 5 Locks Walk. But I'll let you know that week. Thank you so much. Great to see you all. Bye.